Marrow had lived in the quiet depths of the earth for centuries, her existence entwined with the forgotten bones buried beneath the soil. She was a bone fairy, a rare and ancient creature gifted with the ability to hear the whispers of the dead. While other fairies tended to flowers, dreams, or even the stars, Marrow listened to the sorrowful echoes of those long gone. By brushing her delicate fingers across the remains of the deceased, she could hear their final thoughts, their regrets, their unfinished stories. Some begged for justice, others for peace. And some wished only to be remembered. But Marrow was tired of lingering in the past. She longed to witness the beauty of life, to experience the warmth of the living world. And so, against the rules of her kind, she ventured into the human realm. It was in the halls of St. Augustine Hospital that she saw him for the first time. Dr. Elias Mercer was a man of extraordinary skill and compassion, a surgeon whose hands had saved countless lives, yet whose eyes carried the weight of every soul he had lost. Marrow watched him work, mesmerized by the way he mended flesh and bone with such precision and care. He was unlike any human she had ever observed. He did not fear death, but neither did he welcome it. He fought against it, a battle waged with scalpel and sutures. And just like that, Marrow found herself drawn to him. She began to visit him in secret, unseen by human eyes. At first, she merely watched from the shadows, whispering prayers for his patience, hoping that her magic might lend him strength. But soon, it was not enough. She wanted to know him. She wanted him to know her. And so, one evening, she took a form he could see. A young woman with pale skin, silver hair, and eyes that shimmered like polished bone. She walked into his world as a lost visitor, claiming to be a medical student fascinated by surgery. And Elias, intrigued by her curious nature, welcomed her into his life. But Marrow did not tell him the truth. Not yet. She did not tell him that the dead whispered through his hands. That every life he saved left an echo, an imprint in the bones of the lost. She did not tell him that every time he held a scalpel, she could hear the voices of those who had died on his table. And she certainly did not tell him that she was falling in love with him. Marrow and Elias grew closer with each passing day. She watched him work, asked him questions about his surgeries, and listened to the stories he told her about the lives he had saved, and those he had lost. Elias found comfort in her presence. He had always felt alone in his work, burdened by the impossible choices he had to make. But Marrow understood. She listened in a way no one else did, her silver eyes filled with something that felt like knowing. One evening, they walked together through the hospital's garden. The air was thick with the scent of rain, and the distant hum of sirens filled the night. Elias reached for her hand, and she let him take it, savoring the warmth of his touch. But the moment their fingers intertwined, a shiver ran down Marrow's spine. A cold wind whispered through her mind, carrying voices from the grave. She gasped. "The dead are speaking through you," she whispered, her grip tightening around his fingers. Elias froze. His face paled as he looked at her, confusion and something dangerously close to fear flickering in his eyes. What did you just say?" Marrow's lips parted, but before she could speak, another voice filled the air. A voice that was not hers. "You were never meant to save me." Elias stumbled back, yanking his hand from hers. His breathing was uneven, his pulse hammering against his throat. Marrow knew that voice. It belonged to a patient Elias had lost on the operating table weeks ago. A man whose ribs she had touched beneath the earth, whose final thoughts had been filled with bitterness and sorrow. Elias looked around wildly, his gaze darting between the empty garden and Marrow's trembling form. "This isn't real," he muttered. "I'm just tired. I'm overworked." But Marrow knew the truth. The voices of the dead had always been with her, but now they were coming through him. And she did not know how to stop it. Elias tried to ignore what had happened that night. He buried himself in his work, pushing away the creeping dread that whispered at the edges of his mind. But the voices did not stop. During surgeries, during quiet moments alone in his office, even in his dreams, he heard them. Faint at first, just murmurs in the distance. But soon, they became louder. He started seeing things in the corner of his vision. The flicker of a shadow where no one stood. The reflection of someone who wasn't there. In Marrow, she had changed. She no longer smiled as she once did. There was sorrow in her eyes, a quiet pain that she would not speak of. She knew what was happening to him, but she did not know how to make it stop. "I should have never touched you," she whispered one night, her voice thick with regret. "I should have never let myself love you." Elias cupped her face in his hands. I don't care what this is, he said. I don't care what you are. I just want to understand. Tears welled in Merrow's silver eyes. You were never meant to hear them, she said. The dead, they've latched onto you now. And they will never let go. Elias could no longer deny the truth. He was haunted. Patients he had lost, people he had never met, voices of the forgotten, they all clung to him now, whispering, begging, screaming. His hands shook as he performed surgery. His sleep was plagued with nightmares of corpses rising from the dead, their empty sockets filled with endless sorrow. And through it all, Merrow remained by his side. She tried to use her magic to sever the connection, to silence the voices. But the more she tried, the more they clung to him. They were not haunting him. They were using him. The only way to stop the voices was for Elias to let go of life itself. Merrow knew it, the dead knew it, and soon, Elias knew it too. But Merrow refused to let him die. So she made a choice. She gave up her magic. The moment her power faded, the voices fell silent. The dead released him, their whispers fading into nothingness. Elias collapsed into her arms, gasping for breath. In Merrow, she was no longer a bone fairy. No longer a creature of the dead. She was human. She had given up everything for him. And as Elias held her close, he knew one thing for certain. He would spend the rest of his life making sure her sacrifice was worth it.